In a shocking turn of events, the news today is saying that video games are neutral to us? Never heard that one before. Where does this new study come from? How does it match up with the research of previous case studies? And what's the real conclusion to be made here? Well, obviously you should be thinking for yourself, but we'll give our thoughts and let you know the details in this video. So make sure you watch till the end. So who is claiming this now? And what are they basing it on? This study, which was made public in late July, comes from the halls of Oxford. The famed university's researchers seem to have dedicated a lot to this study, as they are said to have surveyed nearly 40,000 gamers only to come to the conclusion that there was little to no evidence that video games had much of an impact on the lives of those who play them whatsoever. What were they surveyed about? It seems they were asked basic questions about how satisfied they were with their life, and their levels of sadness, frustration, anger, and happiness. Just put all that down on the scale of 1 to 10 or something like that, I guess. Maybe more meaningfully, they would also poll them on their reasons for playing, be it healthy reasons like fun and relaxation or socializing with friends, or potentially concerning reasons like trying to break the Guinness World Record for most money spent on microtransactions. That may or may not have been a real survey question. I'll leave you to decide. It wasn't. What the researchers found was that in order for the game to make any major impact on someone's well-being, they'd have to play over 10 hours a day. And ultimately, they felt that their reason for playing had a lot more to do with it than anything else. Professor Andrew Shelbisky, one of the researchers in question, stated, quote, "Contrary to what we might think about games being good or bad for us, we found pretty conclusive evidence that how much you play doesn't really have any bearing whatsoever on changes in well-being." End quote. So there you have it. Video games are neither good nor bad, but neutral. Almost as if they're just games or something. Weird. Now hold on. Doesn't this conflict with other similar studies? Indeed, there's been no shortage of study on how video games affect us in the last few decades, with many varying results. Just recently in 2021, there was a study that actually claimed that playing video games was positively correlated with one's well-being. But of course, this was from a far less reputable source than the study we're talking about today. You see, the nobodies that try to claim this are none other than, how about that? That study also came from the University of Oxford, some 17 months prior to the new study. So what gives here? What changed? The video game medium couldn't have shifted that much in a year, could it? Well, simply put, it's a sample size issue. That's always one of the bigger caveats that can come from a study like this. Not every study is created equal in terms of the amount of people surveyed. Sometimes the resources just aren't there for this. And when you're doing something so broad as trying to figure out how the effect of video games has on the average person, you really need a lot of people to get a confident result. In the case of the 2021 study, they were working with far less subjects to speak of, which may have skewed the results. But once the sample size increases to, again, nearly 40,000 participants, it goes from being a fun anecdote to become a much stronger bit of evidence. Additionally, the new study had another thing this previous one didn't, which is the backing of a number of publishers to track 6 weeks of users' gameplay habits. So while the two reports conflict, it's easier to say that this new one overrides last year's findings. But doesn't the media say that video games are harmful to us? Okay, first of all, just broadly stating the media like that makes this into a very loaded question. But secondly, yes, they have been saying that for some time. Many a news outlet have been waging a mostly losing battle against video games for what feels like forever, for practically as long as one pixelated character has been able to punch another pixelated character in their pixelated face. Stuffy suits have gotten red-faced about it. Be it Night Trap's campy B-horror being taken as seriously as humanly possible in the 90s, GTA's crime simulator hitting peak relevance in the early 2000s, Mass Effect 2's sex scenes being rather overhyped in their detail at the start of the 2010s, or of course the evergreen arguments that FPS games were the root of every single school shooting of the last 3 decades. It seems that media run by folks who couldn't tell a joystick from a stick in the mud has always had it out for video games. I don't think you need us to tell you that this has never been anything more than sensationalization, and a loud example of the long-standing tradition in which old people yell about things that weren't around when they were young, regardless of what actual legitimate research might find. I'm sure you'll always see news outlets giving the spotlight to proclaim experts from a demographic that would look at Xbox Series X and call it the Nintendo with zero irony. But back to the study of today. What games were included in this research anyway? How genre spanning was this? And therein lies the small issue with this study, which leaves room for more future ones to further supersede it. See, they did admit in their comments on it that they did not span the entire field of games in their research, by any means. Actually, the list of included games is pretty funny. They included Outriders, Forza Horizon 4, Apex Legends, The Crew 2, Animal Crossing New Horizons, Gran Turismo Sport, and EVE Online. You might have noticed an odd pattern emerging there, and I do mean that literally. Every other game on that list is a racing title. Why, among 7 games, which otherwise span a decent variety of genres, do you have 3 racing games? Well, as stated, they got a number of publishers to aid them in getting data for their study. But while they contacted over 30 such publishers about this, only 7 opted to take part. As such, you're left with just a handful of what they were hoping to include, and that's why the result was so odd. A cynic might say that Nintendo, the publisher of happy-go-lucky life simulator creator Animal Crossing was less concerned about what they might find than, say, Bethesda, the publisher of Doom Eternal. And if there's anything we can conclude with 100% certainty from this list, it's that developers of racing games have absolutely nothing to hide. So that's a wonderful thing. Even so, this list is a lot more comprehensive than the recently mentioned 2021 study, which in addition to Animal Crossing New Horizons, also looked at Plants vs. Zombies Battle for Neighborhoodville. And that's it. Those are the two. Here's hoping the 2023 study further expands, and we get maybe 10 or 11 next time. Specifically, I'm really curious about the effect that Chocobo GP is having on people. But seriously, what conclusion can we draw here? Personally speaking, I think the conclusion that the researchers came to here is an apt one. Whether or not video games are healthy depends entirely on who is playing them and for what purpose. They can be healthy or unhealthy for you, just like practically anything else. Ultimately, it's up to us to exhibit positive behaviors and try to cultivate positive mindsets, and we can do that with any hobby in the world. But we can also take anything too far and turn even the most fun of activities into stressful chores if we approach them the wrong way. For starters, trying to turn something fun into a job and focusing solely on being the very best at it, or trying to turn it into a money-making endeavor, is one of the easier ways to suck the fun out of an activity. That happens with games all the time, but it can also happen with art of all sorts, or really any hobby that you might pick up. Really, it just goes to show that anything can be unhealthy if you establish too much of a dependence on it, or base your whole personality upon it. In that way, video games aren't unique at all, and indeed, they aren't good or bad, but solely neutral on their own. At the end of the day, they're just games, at least by themselves. Whether you make them more than that in a positive or negative way is up to you. And that is all we have time for today. What are your thoughts on this new study? Do you feel that video games have improved your day-to-day living, hindered it, or had no real effect one way or the other? Are you looking forward to next year's University of Oxford paper with even more subjects that will debunk this one? Let us know down in the comments below. And until next time, thanks for watching.